there's two things for this conversation. And one is people should go deeper than what they read in the news. Mm-hmm. And so what are some ways that you guys go deeper? You know, I think a lot of our audience would like to know, because, you know, they don't have CISOs that go deeper. And so they're just sort of going off of hearsay or whatnot, right? So what are some tips you guys have to go deeper? And then the other was around how the digital transformation has evolved the role and responsibilities of the CISO. But Bob, what are your thoughts on what's going on with Okta? Like, what would you do to go deeper than what you're seeing in the news?
Well, usually over time, I end up vetting my sources. So, you know, you can get a hold of a lot of different security sources, and there's some of them out there that are looking for headlines, looking for sound bites that are going to grab eyeballs. And then there are some, like Dave mentioned earlier, which is probably one of my go-to sources on big things, big stories like this, which is Krebs on security. He doesn't publish things until he has a lot of backup data. And you can actually, when you read through one of his articles, it's well researched. He's not jumping the gun and bringing things out before he has all the facts. So those are kind of the hallmarks of what I look for in a source. And then I keep those sources, and those are where I go to when these type of things come out. And I stay clear of the ones that are looking for sound bites or eyeballs.
I think that right now there's a lot of sensationalism that are going on. Like they're going back, Jim's point about nation state actors, especially with what's going on in the world right now, they're real threats. But it's from my experience, the companies, if you work for one of those companies that a nation state's going to come after, when you start looking at some service companies, some consumer product companies, you know what, those type of actors really aren't interested in you. Really kind of, and this is kind of having a real sense of what your understanding of threat landscape is. If you're like I said, you're a $400 million CPG company in the Midwest or on the Northwest, that's not, if there's a vulnerability that's been exposed by a nation state, they're not probably coming after you because you're not worth their time. But what it does do is it makes you the realizing that the bad guys that are just more the street crooks that are going to try to get some money out of you, those are going to follow up pretty quickly. So this is why I go to trusted sources, like you said, Krebs, understanding those guys that are able to be able to penetrate an organization from a very high level. Those tools are going to come down. They're going to come downstream. It's an interesting capitalistic look at the hacker side of it. So you do need to kind of keep up with it. But I think that it is stay away. I think part of the going really to hit home to what Bob said is the sensational media makes companies panic that don't need to panic, and they throw money at vendors that they probably don't need to throw money at, and in a panic time. And I think that that's really kind of a takeaway that I have for all of this. It's scary. And like I said, it's scary. And I think that when you start looking at the results, it's cyber attacks that hit small to medium sized companies. The percentage of those companies that turns into a black swan event is it's scary if you're running under that company. But I think really understanding who's going to target you, China and Russia and the bad guys, they're not looking for those companies, but they will. the street crooks will end up hitting them. So, know what's out there, know the patches that have been done, know what you need to do to mitigate, those kind of high end ones. But you do have some time.
So even the CPG companies, my only advice there is there are the North Koreas of the world who want ransomware because they want money. So I do think, the door may open where your impact is not necessarily your product, but your money. And so I would probably be a little more alerted toward ransomware attacks through whatever this incident creates potentially. The other is I kind of agree. I agree with both Dave and Bob. My view has always been to triangulate sources of information to sort of see where the source of truth, is in between. We still don't know enough, and I would take that, is what do you know and when do you know it, and is it enough to take action on? I still would have, if I have the resources, in my case I did, look at vulnerable paths and look at that. The other is now, depending on your organization, who you have access to, if you have a contact at FBI, if you have a contact if your suppliers are your most natural ones, if you have a license with a software firm or with a CrowdStrike or with a Microsoft, or even if you're just a consumer of, say, one of the hyperscalers, it doesn't hurt to have your team call and talk, even if it's just to the marketing rep or the account exec, just to say, what do you guys know? And can you get more information? Most likely they can dig a little deeper for you in their own company and tell you. And that way you're at least getting some assurance or some information from the people who might also be impacted by this particular breach. So those are some things I think. There's a technique. If you're the CIO or the CISO, there's a technique I recommend is make it very urgent without panicking. Show a sense of urgency without panicking, such that you would want to make sure you're tracking this, because you're going to have to answer some questions to somebody, probably your boss, probably the next, and you may want to volunteer that you're on top of this, because it's good practice to exercise this, even if you have no impact whatsoever. It's just good practice to, this is what we would do. Now, what would we do if we were impacted? And so that's just some things that I think about that I think would help so that you don't fall into an easy way of being complacent.